Okay, now that we got the sliders completely assembled, we're ready to mount them to the 4Runner. And the first thing you want to do, the first step, when you look at the underbelly of the 4Runner, you're going to see the frame of the 4Runner, the vehicle, and along the frame you're going to find these little plastic tabs, and I'm holding one right now. For example, you're going to go ahead and rip those tabs right off the frame because they're going to be obstructing your way as you're mounting it. If you leave them in there, it's not going to be completely flush with the arm that you're going to be mounting onto the frame, so you won't get that nice flush and sturdiness. So I definitely recommend taking out these tabs before you start mounting the arm and the slider onto the body frame as well. And it's always good to have another partner with this, just for safety reasons, and it's always good for your buddy to always check your work too. Sometimes it's never going to be correct. So definitely get a buddy. And when it comes to mounting these sliders, definitely recommend a 3-ton jack car lift. And we got 2 jacks on either end, just in case we lose the grip of the slider and it slides off the lift itself, and these jacks will catch them. So it's just always about safety, no matter what, and having fun as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to mount these sliders onto the passenger side, and then we're going to move to the driver's side next.
So with the tool, you're going to just grab your screwdriver, and then you're going to reach underneath and pry that little plastic tab out. You won't be needing them, so no need to save the plastic tabs along the frame. Now we're going to take our flex wrench and we're going to just unscrew the bolt from the bracket that's holding the brake line. Save those bolts for later as we will be using them. The next step, we're going to mount the slider onto the hijack lift, centering it. Having each person on one end of the slider to balance it, jack it up to the level of the frame and slide it into position. I would say this is probably the easiest side to start with, so you have an idea of the placement of the slider before we move on to the driver's side. Once we have the slider into position, we're going to take the Hex Head Bolt and place them into the cutout holes on the armor of the slider, then thread them into the frame. Screw them into the frame, but do not fully tighten them, as we will need to make final adjustments before securing it to the frame. Start with the top side first, and then work your way down to the bottom, securing the Hex Head bolts into the bottom of the frame. While you're probably already in the zone working away, it's always best to have your partner to come in and check on your work.
You're a good boy. Why do you judge me with those judgmental eyes, Henry? Now that we got the slider mounted with the bolts and the self-tapping screws, we're going to go ahead and use this punch to punch into these 2 holes here. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to just find it right in the center, right so, and we'll just slam it. Yep, that's a good one. Right in the middle of that one.
After punching into the frame, grab your drill and 5/16 drill bit and begin drilling into the frame. It's an uncomfortable moment when you realize you're drilling into your vehicle. Don't worry, she can handle it. Also, it's best that I do it on my vehicle before you begin installing your sliders, so you get an idea of what you're up against. A little muscle, patience, and perseverance will be needed for this job as you're drilling through 3/16 of steel. And on a note, be sure to angle your drill to the degree to which the mount of the arm is angled. Go at a 45 degree rather than a straight up as you're drilling. Once completed, take the self-threading screws and apply it to the 2 holes you've drilled, and you may now tighten the rest of the Hex Head bolts that are currently attached to the frame, as well as the parking light brake. Attach the harness of the parking light brake onto the slider's arm frame once more, and now we're ready to move on to the driver's side.
We're looking at the plate that's covering the KDSS here, and we have 2 bolts here. We're gonna get our 12mm flex wrench, and we're just gonna loosen it up. You want to make sure to save the bolts and the washers whenever you're removing them from the original vehicle, because you're going to be reusing them later. So we're going to save these guys right in there. lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. I always got to remind myself of that. Slowly unthreading them, okay? Watch yourself, washers and nuts don't go flying at you. It's kind of funny I said that. Now, right here you're going to see this little bit of a prong that goes into the frame of the vehicle. As you can see right there. It's kind of a little awkward to get out, but you just got to wiggle it out a little bit and keep in mind of another one there that you can't see. So unhook that one part there, and then it should come out like so. And here we are. Now, here, this is the KDSS line, so we really want to be careful with that. It's very fragile, and I would hate for anything to happen to my KDSS and anything to happen to your KDSS as well. So now we got the plate removed, we're going to get out underneath.
Take the cover plate for the KDSS with you as we're about to do a slight modification. You will need safety glasses and an angle grinder for this part. Carefully grind out the little prong on the KDSS cover plate, and that's it. It's simple, right? Okay, now that we took the angle grinder, cut the little guy off, this is the arm. Don't need that anymore. And this is how it should look now, your KDSS cover. And what you want to do is you're going to take a file that down, make it nice and neat, and then we're going to put that off to the side, save it for later, and then we're going to get right back underneath the 4Runner. Moving down from the KDSS cover plate in front of the vehicle, in the middle you'll find another cover plate that is protecting the KDSS pump. We're going to go ahead and remove the bolts from the cover plate and place the cover plate aside for now. No modifications will be needed for this part, and be sure to save the bolts for the cover plate as we will be reinstalling them later in the video. On the KDSS pump you'll find 3 bolts, 2 on the bottom attaching the pump to the frame itself. Go ahead and remove those and save those bolts. Another one that goes directly into the pump is located at the top. Grab your 12mm flex wrench and start loosening that bolt. But do not remove the bolt. Leave it in place where you found it, as we will tighten that bolt later in the video.
Unscrewing all the screws for the gas tank skid plate, for the KDSS line, the brake line, as well as the cap for the KDSS. I also want to keep in mind of this harness that's holding the brake line here, and this is a pretty important part here as we're about to mount the arms of the slider onto the frame of the vehicle. And as we do that, we want to make sure that the arm slides in between the gas skid plate here. And as we're mounting our arm into the frame of the vehicle, it's going to slide in between the gas tank, and it's going to slide underneath the KDSS line as well as the brake line and that harness that's holding the brake line. And we want this part to be on the outside of the arm. So as soon as we have that mounted, we're going to take that hook and we're going to hook it right back into the arm. There should be a little cutout, and we're going to thread that into the arm, back into the frame, and we should be good to go.
The reason for loosening the KDSS line is so we're able to wedge the front and the back arms of the mounts into the sliders in between the KDSS line without applying too much pressure on the line. Our goal is we try to move the KDSS line away from the frame so we have a little bit of clearance to slide those in there, but it has proven to be a little bit difficult.
Towards me?
As we prepare our second mount of our slider, almost seeing the finish line of this project, all of it came to an erupting halt as we ran into another problem.
Alright, a little bit of a rant. This is probably one of the most frustrating installations I've ever done or will ever do. Even though it's my first time doing this kind of stuff, this has not been a good experience at all. What we're having a problem with when mounting the slider on the driver's side with KDSS is you have no wiggle room. You have absolutely no wiggle room to wiggle the mount of the arm in between the frame and the KDSS line. The tension of the KDSS line just doesn't, it can't move, it can't swing forward a little bit or anything. It's there. And we're just afraid that if we put too much tension and pressure on that, we're going to damage the KDSS, and that's what we're avoiding, and that's what I hope you guys avoid as well. And it's just been a very tedious process, and this is really calling out to Victor 4x4, because on their website, it says it's compatible with KDSS with slight modifications. They never mention it in the video, and they never mention it in the PDF file that's attached to the Blitz slider buying page. And I'm just kind of questioning how they're able to get it in. I hope we're doing this wrong, and we can learn from it, and I can laugh at it, and it look like a complete jackass on it, and I'm completely fine with that because I'm learning. But I really am questioning how they're able to do this. So, with that being said, Jake suggested another approach to this, and it's something that I don't like, and something you won't like either. And I hope that this is completely wrong on doing this, but this is basically how we went about it. Took the slider off, dismounted it from the high jack lift, and we took the arm off of the front part of the slider on the driver's side, and we mounted the arm onto the frame first. So that's bolted on and ready to go, and then we just put it back on the lift, lifted it in. We slide the back in first, in between the brake line, the KDSS line, as well as the gas tank skid plate, which, by the way, you have to really pry that to wedge it, to like get it right in there, and that's been very difficult. Wear gloves, like leather gloves, because it's very sharp. And then with that, we lined up the arm onto the slider, but then we have to reach our hand inside underneath the slider and thread the bolts through the thread holes and into the nuts. That's inside the slider. It's not fun, so I recommend if you have small hands or you know someone that has small hands to help you with this, because it's pretty frustrating. And on top of that, I'm kind of questioning the design of this, and to better point out my argument, this cutout right here. You can see this cutout right here, and if you look inside of it, you can see where the bolts would come through and where the nuts would be in place. And basically what we've been doing is we've been taking, the nuts here, and we've been feeding them through here, holding it in place until the other person threads the bolt through here until it catches the nut and then it tightens it. But that's basically what we're running into right now, and it seems to work. So far we got it up, it's mounted, we got 2 bolts in, and right now it's just a matter of just kind of buttoning things up, and we're good to go. So that's where we are in this whole process. Okay, so currently under the vehicle, and this is the front driver's side of the arm, and looks like we got everything all tightened up. It was not easy at all. What I would suggest is when you mount the slider onto the frame and you put the bolts in, make sure they're not tightened all the way, just loose, so you have a little bit of wiggle room, and lightly just let off on the car lift. And so this whole thing will come down a little bit. You may need to pull it down just to give yourself a little bit of room. And with that, I had to use this tool to wedge it in to the top part there, and that was not easy, I will say that. But I got it in, and hopefully my little tip will probably help with the whole process. But having another person probably standing on top of the slider itself, even though it's a little risky, putting a little bit of weight down will give you that little bit of extra room there. But we got it on, and currently we're gonna just be buttoning up the rest of the 4Runner, and we should be good to go.
Starting with the front and working our way down, begin tightening the bolts along the frame. Now with the arm mounted onto the frame, you're going to grab the KDSS cover plate from earlier and mount it back from where it once was before. Take the screws from the cover plate and screw them back into place, securely tightening the bolts, and move your way down the vehicle. As we move down into the middle part of the vehicle, we're back at the KDSS pump. So tighten the top bolt that's on the pump securely, then reapply the 2 bolts removed from earlier onto the bottom to reattach the pump to the frame. Then take the KDSS pump cover plate and mount it back into place, as well as tighten the bolts to secure the plate. And with the final touches, we're going to go ahead and tighten the rest of the Hex Head Bolt into the frame and placing the KDSS and parking brake line back into its original place. And lastly, remounting the gas tank skid plate back onto the frame.
Okay, I can finally say that we made it to the end of this video, and if you made it to this end of this video, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Looking at the sliders, they just look absolutely fantastic. You know, they really add character to my 4Runner, and it looks like, you know, looks like I mean business when it comes to going off-roading and overlanding and so forth. The whole process was very frustrating, as you watched. I really hope the way we did it by adding the arm onto the frame and then the slider itself, I really hope that's not the right way. I really hope that I am wrong and there was another simpler way that we just didn't look at. So I'm going to be looking into that, because I feel like you yourself, that if you're thinking about purchasing these sliders, or even if you have it and you're ready to install, I don't want you going through what Jake and I went through. And it was very painstakingly time consuming and obviously frustrating. But as I mentioned before in my other video, you know, I'm new to this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying, and I'm a student. I'm forever going to be a student. I can never master this. But in the end, I have fun, and this is technically my first time ever really doing a modification to a 4Runner and really getting under the belly of my vehicle. So happy how it turned out. And the next step of this video is the wiring, and so we're going to go ahead and we're going to wire these lights to the 4Runner in the next video. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching my struggle in this journey. I will see you in the next one, so take it easy.